This is in the galaxy far, far away. Those are not banthas. La Brea Tar Pits, Los Angeles, California. And right next door at the Academy Museum, they're showing Phantom Menace in 35 millimeter. This being Star Wars Day, May 4th, 2025.
Thanks, man. Yeah, through Star Wars, sometimes it's kind of hard to find that angle. But it is.
I want you to raise your hand if you are coming to the screening this morning. Keep them raised for me, guys. Pablo's going to try to get a count. We are planning to have the house open as soon as we open doors for the museum as well. And if you guys have your hand raised, raise your other hand if you plan on going to the museum as well. Do you already have tickets for that museum as well? Yeah, cool, excellent. So after the screening, if you've got both those hands raised, you're gonna come back down to see us at the Welcome Center, and we're gonna get you a wristband for the galleries upstairs. Cool? Cool. But screening is first, guys. So we're gonna have those folks that raised their hand follow my friend Pablo to get ready to go into the theater. And then everybody else that didn't raise their hand, you're gonna stay here with me for just a second while we get those screening guests in, and we'll get you checked in for general admission right after that.
The David Geffen Theater. 1,000,000 seats open right now. Yeah, you had a bunch of people like rushing in. Like they're gonna have to sit up front.
I'm going to pretend that was for me, and thank you so much. Good morning. Honestly, there's much more important people to applaud in just a few minutes. Good morning, and welcome to the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures, the largest museum in the world devoted to the arts, sciences, and artists of movie making. My name is Robert Renaud. I'm one of the associate programmers in the museum's film programs department. This morning, as the first part of our three-part May the 4th celebration in our David Geffen Theater, we are screening Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. On a 35mm print from the Academy Film Archive. Courtesy of Disney and Lucasfilm. Academy Museum film programming is generously funded by the Richard Roth Foundation. First, a few housekeeping rules. Please turn off and stow all your devices. Please keep your smartwatches dark. No eating or drinking allowed besides bottled water. And photographing or taping the film is forbidden. I'd like to thank our theater operations team, such as theater managers, Joe Farley, Kim Lowe, and Jennifer Reyna, and our projectionist, Isaac Sherman. Andor, The Clone Wars, The Mandalorian, The Book of Boba Fett, Ashoka, Obi-Wan Kenobi, The Bad Batch, The Acolyte, Skeleton Crew, Today, there is no shortage of new Star Wars stories on the large and small screens, but between 1983, when Return of the Jedi was released, and 1999, when The Phantom Menace premiered, the only new Star Wars projects on film were a few TV productions, including 2 Ewok movies. The Phantom Menace is also the first time George Lucas would direct a feature film since the original Star Wars 22 years earlier. George Lucas spoke in interviews about the decades-long gap between Star Wars films and about his approach to filmmaking and storytelling in general. According to Lucas, first, I was burned out, and that's probably the most important thing. Also, I'd been very frustrated because my imagination had created a large, crazy world. I could only put a very small part of it on the screen, so I wanted to wait until the technology caught up. I love the movement of film more than anything else, the cinematic quality that attracts me. I like visual imagery, but I started out in pure film, which is really a kinetic experience, so that's where my focus is. That's why I intend more of a kinship with silent films than more modern film. I like the old cinema. My films are kind of a hybrid, a different style of filmmaking than what I would call talking head movies. Some people don't get it, especially the more academic types. They're used to a particular kind of movie, and if you bring them something else, they don't understand it. The acting in Star Wars movies is a throwback to earlier time, the 30s and 40s, and more theatrical acting and method and realism. When you get away from that convention, a lot of people don't understand it anymore. They're used to a more affected kind of style. People who aren't academically oriented, like kids, they don't know any of that. They just take it for what it is and think it's great. The Phantom Menace received 3 Oscar nominations for sound: Gary Rydstrom, Tom Johnson, Sean Murphy, and John Midgley. Sound effects editing for Ben Burtt and Tom Belfer. And visual effects for John Knoll, Dennis Muren, Scott Squires, and Rob Coleman. Before the film, we will have a discussion with a key performer in The Phantom Menace. Our moderator is Dylan Marin. Dylan Marin is a writer and producer. He created and hosted the podcast Conversations with People Who Hate Me, and wrote a book of the same name. In 2023, he released The Redemption of Jar Jar Binks as a 6-part audio documentary. He writes for Ted Lasso. And our special guest today is Ahmed Best. Co-founder of the Afro Rhythm Futures Group and host of the Afro Futurist podcast. Ahmed is an executive producer, actor, writer, director, producer, educator, and futurist. He's a Telly, GLAD, Stage Raw, Ovation, and Annie Award winner. Ahmed played Jedi Master Kelleran Beck in The Mandalorian. He played Jar Jar Binks, the first CGI main character in movie history. And starred in the Broadway musical Song. He's a senior fellow at USC's Annenberg School for Journalism and Communication, professor at USC's School of Dramatic Arts, and visiting professor at Stanford's Hasso-Plattner Institute of Design. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dylan Marin and our special guest, Ahmed Best.
Ahmed.
Good morning, Dylan.
How are ya?
I'm good. This is one of the best Sundays I think I've had.
Yeah, this is a normal Sunday for me.
Yeah.
Right? These are my best friends, all of them. So.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. I'm pretty generous.
Before we start, can I say something? I would like to thank the members of the Academy for having me. I don't know if I'll ever get to say that again.
This is the place to say it.
Yeah.
We met 3 years ago.
We did.
We made a podcast together.
We did.
Called The Redemption of Jar Jar Binks. And that was such an honor for me. This is, I'm sure many of us know this story, but your story was one that has fascinated me for so long. I've just been obsessed with it. I obviously saw this movie, I think opening day for my friend Sam's 11th birthday. And I was in the theater, United Artists, 14th Street, Union Square, if you know it well. Yeah, you've been there.
Well.
Yeah, you love it. I've just been tracking your story for so long. I reached out to you, and it was such an honor to make that show with you. And we all thought that this was the right shape to introduce this movie today. So I want to know,
Yes.
how did Star Wars first come into your life?
1977. I was very, very young. and it was the first movie I ever saw in a theater.
Whoa.
Yeah, and I remember showing up late. My father, who is a filmmaker, who is a cinematographer, um, movie buff. I was the only kid in the South Bronx who had like American cinematographer and Fellini on their coffee table. So people would like come to my, you know, apartment in the South Bronx and be like, what is this? You know, I didn't have like Legos and shit. I had that. My father was a big movie buff. So there was always like some kind of cinema going on in the house, either a discussion or he was watching something, you know. And so when this movie came out, when A New Hope came out, we were just like, he had to go see it because it was just something cinematically that was very different. So he dragged me and my brother and my sister to Manhattan to see this thing late. So we were in like the first couple rows. And I didn't really know what I was in for, you know, I had never seen a movie before. So, you know, I remember this so vividly at that young age, that's how much of an impression it made on me. I remember sitting down and, you know, kind of just like being really small in these big seats and just like looking around at people, and then it popped on like the blang, and I was just enthralled, and I didn't move for the entire movie. I was just in it. I couldn't believe that something like this was possible and that I got to experience it. And then since then, it was just like Star Wars everything, you know, in my life.
So, yeah, please. So fast forwarding a few years, you have this like incredibly artistic upbringing. Like art is just in your life.
Yes.
Your dad is a cinematographer. Your mom is a dancer, musician.
Yeah.
Both very accomplished. And then you were in an acid jazz band.
I was.
One of my
jazz
favorite
hall.
facts of his life. And acid jazz band, you're kind of bumping around New York. You get cast in the touring production of Stomp.
Yes.
Do you all know what Stomp is? Yes. And we're going to be screening Stomp instead. No, it's...
doing a Stomp one-man.
Yeah, Stomp one-man show. So Stomp, I remember, I grew up in New York City, and you could not turn a corner without seeing an ad for Stomp. Like,
Yeah.
Stomp was everywhere. It was like music out of trash cans, is
Yeah.
how I would describe it. Yeah.
Yeah.
You were in the touring production of Stomp. Take me to the San Francisco stop
Oh my gosh.
of the touring production of Stomp.
All right, I will try to make this a medium size. This is a very
Great.
long story.
Right.
So I originally got cast to be a New York cast of Stomp, and there were three. This was the time where Stomp became this international phenomenon, and so it's a British show. It's from Brighton, England, and all these Brits came to New York City and was just like, well, this was the 90s, so there was a lot of money flying around for really superfluous things. And Stomp was one of those things, right? Everybody was like, oh, found object percussion. They make music on garbage cans. Like, would never fly today, this political climate. So at the time, right, there was so much like interest in art and culture. That's what happens when you balance a budget, right? So there was like about 30 people hired to do these iterations of Stomp. And there was like 2 touring casts and a New York cast. And I was in the New York cast for like a year or so. And then the creators of Stomp decided to mix us all up and send people out. So I wasn't really keen on going out on the road because I was in the jazz hole and I was making music at the exact same time. So New York was very much like I wanted to be here and still have a job. But then I was just like, you know what, let me get out of here for a little bit. So I jumped on a touring company and I was the lead of the show on tour. And when you're doing a show on tour, your cast becomes like really super tight because you do these things called split weeks, where it's just like you do a show one night, you're on a bus that night, you're in a new city the next day, and then you're doing a show in a new city the next day. So it's really exhausting but it's like going through war with people, right? You're just like, oh, remember Danville, Kentucky? Do I remember Danville, Kentucky? You couldn't eat after 6 o'clock. It was terrible, right? So by the time we get to San Francisco, we were all just like, yes, big city, we can eat after 6 o'clock. We don't have to like jump into a bus the next day or jump on a plane the next day to go into a city because we had a sit down. We can be there for a few weeks. And, you know, big city markets, you have more people in the audience and you get to invite more people, and San Francisco was like popping at the time. So we are at the Golden Gate Theater in San Francisco. It's a beautiful old theater in San Francisco. And one of my cast members gets really sick and has to go home. And so the New York producing office brings somebody from New York to San Francisco to fill in for him, right? But the guy that they brought in had people in San Francisco, and he had seniority over me. And so as soon as he lands in San Francisco, he comes to rehearsal and he's just like, well, I'm gonna lead the show. And Ahmed, you're gonna play this other role, a role that I hadn't played in like 8 months since I've been in New York, right? And I was like, what are you talking about? We just went through the nom here. Like, we just had split weeks and we're a tight cast and we know our show. And he was like, yeah, no, I'm leading, you're doing this. And so, you know, I was a very young, rambunctious, some might say arrogant young person at the time. And I wasn't very happy about this decision. So I was very good at stomp, like really, really, really good at stomp. Like stomp was like tailor-made for somebody like me. Grew up a martial artist and a mover and a drummer and an actor, and like stomp was all of those things, right? And so I was just like, oh yeah, I got this. But again, here comes the arrogant 20-year-old at the time, where I was just like, I am going to make sure that no one in this audience will ever see you as the lead of this show. I am going to take this thing over, right? And I did. And it was a little bit ridiculous, but my cast knew, because we went through those split weeks, they knew I was on one, right? And so they were just like, oh, here he goes, get out of the way. So they knew to get out of the way. This guy didn't, right? He didn't know how to get out of the way. And I was a much better drummer than he was. So I remember this, yeah, I remember this one, there were two kind of like staple moments of that show. There was a number in Stomp called Suspension, right? Where we're hanging from the top of the theater and we're swinging. We're on like rock climbing harnesses, right? And we're playing on the trash cans on this grid, right? And I was in charge of like the speed of that number. And I counted it off at an incredible speed that, you know, usually that number takes about 2.5 minutes. It took probably about 30 seconds that night. And then I started doing like crazy. I was like playing with one hand and I was just looking at it. I'm like, I know you can't do this. And then everybody else in the cast was just like, oh God, this is gonna be one of them nights, right? So that was the one staple moment, right? And then the end of the show, we do this number called Encore, where the lead of the show stands and everybody's like clapping with him, and right? And I was like, nope, nobody's gonna see you on this either. So I'm playing a trash can, right? And I'm standing I'm supposed to be behind the guy. I'm standing in the front of the stage, like pointing at people, like I'm Belle Biv DeVoe. I'm like, yeah, what's up? What I didn't know was, throughout the whole show, I had these like group of girls in the audience who just turned into my like little groupies. And every time I walked out on stage, they were just like, oh my God, he's so wonderful, right? So I was playing at the end and I see the groupies and I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm about to go in on the groupies, right? And then he's standing up there and he's looking at me like, what are you doing? I'm just like, what do you think I'm doing? And so the groupies are like, oh my God, he's so wonderful. And then, no joke, I really did this. I took off my shirt and I threw it into the audience. And it was all sweaty and whatnot. And I was like, yeah, take that, groupies. And they all jumped up like I was Menudo. They're like, oh my God. And they grabbed the shirt and they were like, just here, oh my God. And I walked off stage, right? So I'm in, this all is gonna make sense. I'm in
I
the,
feel like we're just in Magic Mike right now.
Yeah.
Like I feel like this became a Magic Mike.
I was totally just like, I did the Channing Tatum like, spam, get down. So I walk off stage, I'm in the dressing room, and then it kind of dawned on me the kind of show that I just did. And I started feeling awful. Because Stomp really works when the 8 people on stage work together. It doesn't really work when there's one person standing out from the 8, right? Because it's a show about communication. It's a show about community and collectiveness. And by the end of the show, everyone in the theater is speaking Stomp, right? By the end of that show, nobody was speaking Stomp. Everybody was like, what is that guy doing? And so I started feeling really, really bad about it. So one of my cast members, RJ Sampson, walks in and he goes, hey, Ahmed. And I'm just like, look, RJ, don't say anything to me. All right, man, I know what just happened. I know what I did. I don't want to talk to anybody. And he was like, no, like, I had a friend in the audience. And I was like, I get it, man. I know what kind of show I had and I get it. And he was like, she's from Lucasfilm. And I was like, oh, man. I thought I ruined RJ's chance, right? At something special, because he invited the casting director, Robin Gerland, to the show from Lucasfilm. 3 months earlier from that show, Stomp did a special performance just for Lucasfilm. 3 months earlier. And this was Lucasfilm employees and Stomp. And George liked RJ. And RJ auditioned for Jar Jar, for me.
Love what's happening here. The drama, yeah.
Right? I didn't know this. No one knew. But RJ stayed in touch with Robin and invited her to the show in San Francisco, right? And it all just went like, you just messed up your friend's chance at something really, really wonderful. And I was destroyed. I felt so bad. And I was like, RJ, man, I'm so sorry. I really just I don't know what to say. You know, I'm just like, I can't apologize to you enough. And he was like, no, she wants to talk to you. And I was like, about what? She wants to talk to you. Now, this was before cell phones. So she was like, RJ said, go to the crib. We had these apartments on the top right by Nob Hill. He was like, walk up the hill to the crib and she's gonna call you this afternoon. And I was like, is it gonna get weird tonight, RJ? Like, what is she gonna call me about? Like, he was like, just go up and call you. So I walked like vertically up to because San Francisco is ridiculous. And after a 90-minute Stomp show, walking up that hill, it hurts. So I was like, walking up the hill, like, what is gonna happen? I get to the apartment and I get a phone call and it's Robin. And Robin is like, oh, I really loved your show tonight. And I was like, great, word? She was like, yeah. And then she said these words to me that sounded like this. I want you to come to Skywalker Ranch and audition. And I was like, what? And then 2 days later, I'm driving up Lucas Valley Road, not named after George Lucas, and I'm at Skywalker Ranch auditioning for Jar Jar.
It's amazing. I also, so just because time is limited and we have a movie to watch together.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, me and my best friends. So it's like, so you go to this audition, you obviously get this audition. This is, you get the role. You're cast initially just as the movements of Jar Jar Binks. not as the voice. That is something that they're still going to wait to audition. Talk to me a little about that process of getting the voice in addition to the movements of Jar Jar.
Yeah, so I have been doing like voices and jingles and stuff in New York for years. And I told Robin, I was just like, I asked her, did you guys cast the voice yet? She was like, no, we have no idea what to do, no. And I was like, well, I do voices. And so she was like, all right, send me some voices on a DAT. Now, for the young kids out there who don't know what DATs are, we used to have these like little tapes called digital audio tapes. And they've broken down. I'm sure you can figure this out, but that's what a DAT is. And I put like 6 voices on a DAT. And I gave it to Robin to give to George. And one of them was the voice that I used to do for my little cousins, right? And when I got to the table read and you'll see that if you watch the like behind the scenes of Phantom Menace, they show in the DVD extras, they show the table read, and I'm like hiding at the table read. I'm like behind the script, like, please, what am I doing here? Because I was the least experienced movie person there. Like even little Jake had 2 movies under his belt, you know?
Jake Lloyd, who plays Anakin.
Jake Lloyd played Anakin, and you know, he had just come off this Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, Jingle All the Way. That joke is a slow burn. You'll get that in like 20 minutes. So
as the movie is playing.
Yeah, you'll be like, Arnold Schwarzenegger, brother, I get it. I'm at best. So I was like, I don't know what to do. And so I had already given George the voices, and I didn't know which one he would want to hear, which one he liked, and there was nobody else in there to do Jar Jar. And then so, you know, Jar Jar comes up pretty quick in this movie. And so the pages are going, and I'm just like, it's coming. What do I do? Do I just do it in my voice? Do I do it in one of the 6 voices? Which voice should I do? And then the scene where strapping Liam Neeson and I walk through the forest, right? That's the first scene I get to say. And I'm watching it come up, and I'm just like, I have to make a decision. And I just go for it. I'm just like, oh, Maury, I love yours, right? And then it just, thank you. That's gonna be the title of my Vegas act. That's when it comes out. You have to pay for the next one. That's the voice that comes out. And so I do that for the rest of the movie. And George is not a very expressive person, right? And so I'm trying to read him like, does he like it? Does he not like it? And he goes, yeah, why don't you just do that? And I was like, okay. So as we're shooting, I'm just doing it, and it just kind of stuck. And you know, I knew it worked because all the kids who were in the movie, there were a lot of kids, you know, all the kids who were in the movie just loved it. And every time I did it, they would just be like transfixed. And you know, George would always say that Phantom Menace is a kids movie, and he would always be like, it's, you know, he would always do these like jokes. And there's a scene in the pod race scene where, you know, I get that. You know, which is a Bill Cosby bit before we all realized he was a maniac, right? And he was just like, can you do that like Bill Cosby bit where he gets Novocaine? And then he was like, you know, the IBY, right? And I was like, yeah, of course. So there was a lot of like silliness, like George liked the silliness of it. And so when I did the Jar Jar voice, it just matched with all the kids who loved it. And that's why it stuck.
So it was this like really, please. It was this very, very organic creation of the character, this constant push and pull, this dialogue that you're having with George Lucas. there's also a fascinating element of this, which is that this is like the first of its kind performance that we all now know as motion capture, right? We understand in a bodysuit with all the sensors all around you. At the time, you were introduced to this as you were helping create this technology.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
before everything. So how did it feel? Like, you don't even know that you're in it when you're in it, right? You're just like, you're doing the job. How did it feel after initial, photography to then go to the ILM studios with Rob Coleman and his crew to start creating this character then in just like a bunker almost, right? It's called the volume.
Yeah, and the volume, which now all spaces are now called volumes.
Yeah.
At the time, it was just like a garage at ILM and a bunch of like cameras on tripods and computers that were the size of this stage. Now everybody's just like, everyone's an expert on CGI now. This is way too much CGI. It's like, we needed rooms filled with computers that have the same amount of memory that our iPhones do, right?
Yeah.
But it was thrilling, and it was like my undergrad training in film. It was like better than going to film school, because all of the things that we were doing in real time at ILM, George and Rob Coleman and John Knoll and all of the teams, it felt like we were pioneering something.
Yeah.
And there are very few moments like that in history where you're just like, oh, wait a minute, we're doing something different here. And that was kind of like the first time, because I worked on Phantom Menace 2 years after principal photography, right? And I was seeing things that a lot of the other actors weren't seeing, because I was working with George and Rob and John so closely, and it felt like, I imagine it kind of feels like what like Apple felt like to Steve Jobs and Wozniak. You know what I'm saying? Like that, you're creating an industry, and you know that it's something special. You don't quite know where it's going to go, but you know that there was a before this moment, and after this moment will never be the same. So it was thrilling to be a part of that, especially at 24, And I just remember going, wow, this is going to change movies. Like, it really is going to change how things are going to be done. And George was very much on this, like, movies need to change. I am pushing the envelope. We are going digital. We're going to be shooting digital. We're going to be creating on digital tools, right? Like, things that we kind of take for granted right now, George like invented as we were doing Phantom Menace. Like, every film technique from the beginning of film till now is in the Phantom Menace. Like, every one of them. So I didn't realize how big an impact I was going to have as an artist, but I knew that this collaboration was going to change things.
Yeah, God, please. And then because the problem of interviewing you, as I've already discovered, is I want like 6 more hours every time I sit down with you. But so we have limited time, but we have to kind of get to this very confusing response that happened right when the movie was released, which was, as I've shared with you before, there was this interesting, there were 2 camps of an anti-Jar Jar sentiment, right? On the one hand, you have some disgruntled fans who feel like Jar Jar is turning their beloved franchise into a kids' movie. And then you have critics, on the other, who read onto Jar Jar racist tropes and racial stereotypes. You are in your 20s at the time that this comes out, and I cannot overemphasize how much of a difference there was between this beautiful creative process that you got to be part of, this almost holy creative process that you, this young Star Wars fan, got to take part in. You're creating new technology with George Lucas. And then you get this response. How, in your mind, are you even beginning to process this stuff?
I couldn't process it at all because, things that are now kind of cliche and comedic when people talk about the performing arts process are actually real, right? So, everybody makes a joke about actors saying, "What's my motivation?" But that's something that we actually really think about, and it's really important when you're crafting a character. You have to be moved. That's why I like the word movies instead of cinema, right? Because movies move you. And everyone in the movie is moved towards something emotionally. And we need that as actors as well. We need to be moved, right? And in order to be moved to create a character, you have to have an intention for that character, right? It's one of those things that it, makes acting hard because you know how it ends, right? In life, you don't know how life ends, so you can walk through life with this, amazing moment-to-moment discovery. But how do you do that when you know how your life ends in the script? You still have to have that moment-to-moment discovery. So intention is a really big thing as an artist when you're crafting these characters. And our intent and motivation for creating Jar Jar was trapped in this bubble. And we had no idea, because the process was so intense and so joyful, we had no idea when it was received that way. And the things that I've been thinking about, because I think about this every day of my life since 1999. When you see these movies and you talk about these movies and you think about these movies, they're all very personal, right? We all have a Star Wars movie in our heads right now. We can all pitch a Star Wars movie right now. Every single one of us. We all have one. We all want one. There is always a character that we were just like, "Ooh, I wonder what happened to Kit Fisto," And we all have that. Man, there should be a Kit Fisto spinoff. Somebody in here is thinking about that right now. So it's all very, very personal. And I said this last week in Japan, sometimes that movie that you have in your head doesn't show up on screen. And because we're so personal with these things, with these movies, we are emotionally affected by it. And at the time, George hadn't directed a Star Wars movie for 20 years before Phantom Menace came back. And everybody who wanted to see Phantom Menace had their own Star Wars movie in their heads. And when this showed up, they didn't remember how they felt as kids. So they wanted the Star Wars movie that had grown up the way they grew up. And George was thinking about, I remember when you all were kids and saw A New Hope. Now I'm going to make something for your kids. And the adults didn't like that.
We unfortunately have time for one last question.
Oh.
But obviously, a lot of time has passed since then. We're weeks away from the 26-year anniversary of the Phantom Menace coming out. Jeez. And in that time, there has been a really...
What?
Sorry. I know. I shouldn't have said that. It's just 2 years ago that it came out. We're in the year 2001. Things are great. But it's... sort of.
Yeah. Definitely going in a direction of not great.
A hard direction, but things are great now. So there has, in the decades since The Phantom Menace came out, there has been a really lovely reconsideration of Jar Jar Binks, a renaissance, if you will. And I think people have come to hear your story, people have come to reconsider the character, people have come to reconsider their own preconceived notions of the character. We have a bunch of wonderful people here who are about to watch this movie. Is anyone watching it here for the first time? Whoa, oh my God, congratulations to you. We have a smattering of hands.
I know there are some people who are watching it in the theater on a big screen for the first time.
Yeah, theater big screen for the first time. We have more hands on. Okay, amazing, amazing, amazing. As we watch it, some for the first time, others for the 100th. What do you want people to keep in mind as they revisit this movie?
I think one of the big things that we can really marvel at is how beautiful the movie is. Like, it is moving art. And I know a lot of times we fall into the technical of it, right? And there are a lot of techniques in this movie, but some of the vistas, some of the wide shots, right? When you're, especially a lot of the wide shots of like Naboo, they're just, it's almost like a painting, you know? It's almost like this really brilliant, beautiful, you know, in-depth painting that moves and people live in. And recollect that this movie was made in 1997, right? And now that we're watching it, and it came out in 99, but watching it now, you know, think about, wow, 97 this was conceived and these things were happening. And there are a lot of firsts, a lot of first times in this movie. And it was made with so much love for the Star Wars people out there, the Star Wars community. Like, all of us in the movie, especially the younger ones of us at the time, like Ewan and Natalie and myself and Jake, we just were so excited to be in the thing that, I mean, it was just this whirlwind of an experience where, you know, we would just show up and just like smile at ourselves. You know, I mean, I remember me and McGregor would just be like, because we're kind of the same age, you know, he's just a little bit older than me, but me and McGregor would be looking at each other like, can you believe we're doing this? You know, like we're doing this, we're in this. And so there's a lot of love and there's a lot of joy. Here's the other thing, and this is the thing that might be a tad controversial. But, you know, whatever, it's Sunday. George Lucas is inherently commenting on society. Star Wars has always been political. It always has been. Regardless of what you think about it being a form of escapism, which it is, but there has always been an underlying message about who we are as people. One of the, you know, I do a lot of futurist work. I'm a futurist. I teach at Stanford as a futurist, and one of the devices that futurists use in order to get you to project into the future and to think about the future in a tangible way is to place things in the past, right? And we are looking at a society that happened a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And one of the reasons why we can fall into it so easily is because it's not us, right? It's about a galaxy far, far away, which gives us a little bit more license to take in what the movie is giving us. But it's always been a commentary on who we are as the Earthlings, right, on this planet, and how we take care of one another, and how we care about one another, right? The Force is this thing that connects all of us, right? It's something that we each have a relationship with. Some have a stronger connection to it than others. And those who have that stronger connection have an agency to have discipline over that connection. That's the Jedi, right? But we are all connected to it in our way, right? And George always says, like, the Force is love, right? That's what the Force is about, love, and how we interact and we love one another. And we see that in these movies, it progresses to a place of empire, which is devoid of love. And as we watch these films, I don't think we are introspective enough to understand philosophically what we're doing here on the earth and why these films resonate with us so strongly emotionally, right? I think one of the things that we're missing a lot in these movies is this presence of the Force. One of the reasons why I'm so bullish on being Keller and Beck is that I do believe that we need a Jedi who is standing for the the tenets and the philosophy of the Jedi unapologetically, regardless of the politics and regardless of the lore, right? The Force is love, and we need to teach that. And as Keller and Beck, the non-reluctant teacher of Star Wars, right? Teachers, I think, are superheroes, and teachers need a superhero on a screen so people can go, I want to do that. I want to be that. I want to be a teacher, right? It's one of the most coveted jobs and one of the most hardest jobs that any one of us could do. We have stopped teaching this idea of this connected force. And the Phantom Menace, you're watching a movie about the times where the Jedi and the Force were love and everyone believed in it. That's why this creature, Jar Jar Binks, who doesn't seem to be important, is on this journey with these Jedis. You notice Jar Jar is not really impressed by the Jedis at all. He's just like, oh, big deal. You know what I'm saying? He's like, oh, Maxie Big, the Force, right? He's just like, please, you guys. But there is a part to play for every single person in this universe, and that part is the love and the acceptance of everyone's art. So as you watch this film, it's really the personification of that. So please keep that in mind.
Ahmed, it is always such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much, Dylan. I have to say that one of the greatest things about being able to tell my story now is the ability to meet you and be and have you as a friend. And I think you are an incredible thought leader. I think you're incredibly courageous for doing the things that you're doing, because not a lot of people have the courage to talk to people who hate them. And I think you are just a wonderful storyteller and a talent. And congratulations on Ted Lasso season 4. And thank you for doing this.
That was all overwhelming to hear, so thank you. And you are all in for such an amazing treat. Please, please, please enjoy The Phantom Menace.
Thank you, guys. Love you guys. Happy to see you too. Where's Chris Koch? Shout out to Chris Koch. And Mezzy.
Curate, educate, convene, and discuss. We honor and pay respect to Tongva ancestors and the Tongva community today, which continues to nurture this land and water through traditional practices, activism, art, and education. We also acknowledge their continued work to safeguard cultural resources.